Good afternoon here in Shanghai. Good morning and probably good evening for those online. My name is Den Chao from Hashke Capital. Hashke Capital is a Hong Kong and Singapore-based blockchain investor. We are one of the earliest and biggest investor in Asia and one of the most active global investor in the blockchain space with over 200 portfolios in different parts of the world. It is my great pleasure to moderate this panel on public chains. And please welcome my panelists, Vitalik, Dominic, and Juan. For obvious reason, the COVID, they cannot make it to the stage, but still we are able to connect virtually and in a way similar to the blockchain system, a distributed way from different continents. And I think, and I'm sure you all agree, they need no introduction. According to my statistics, Vitalik has never missed our summit since 2015. This is his 7th time appearing here. And for Dominic's 3rd time and Juan's 2nd time, if my memory is correct. As in previous years, I know this panel is always one of the most expected, and it will definitely be one of the highlights of this week. Not just because you guys are the creators and founders of the blockchain world's most fundamental infrastructures and ecosystems, but also because we always look forward to hearing your vision and your insights. Today, I will be asking questions around the blockchain technology itself, applications, and ecosystem. So without further ado, let's get started. The first question is for all. Since last year's Shanghai Blockchain Week, what do you think is the most exciting development or progress in the blockchain space over the year? Can we start with Vitalik, and then Juan, and then Dominic?
Sure. So I think, so first of all, from the point of view of the Ethereum community, the biggest change that's happened is the progress that we have seen in things like proof of stake and sharding, where both of those things, or proof of stake and scaling, I'll say, both of those things were last year still mostly just theory and a few test networks. But today there is a live beacon chain and the effort to merge the existing ecosystem into the proof of stake beacon chain is well underway. There are already starting to be test networks of it. But even before that, the proof of stake beacon chain is a network. You can join, you can run a node, you can be part of it. And for scaling, like we've seen many roll-up projects already launch, and they're live. They have networks. You can join them. You can deposit. You can withdraw. So there's still a lot of things that are not finished. But we really have seen a big move from those two things just being ideas to actually being things where there is real evidence, where you can see something that has been launched, it exists, and you can actually go and use it. I think for blockchains in general, ongoing progress in zero knowledge proofs. I think like there's just so much effort in the happening and so much progress happening in that industry that the technology is just always so much better one year than it is a year before. Like now we're talking about using zero knowledge proofs to securely prove execution of entire virtual machines, right? So it's replacing like in big pieces of previous blockchain technology that was much harder to, or that had much weaker properties. So I think on the technology side, a lot of really amazing things happening. And on the application and usage side, just a lot of interest and a lot of many different types of people and industries coming in, and which is good, but it also means that we actually need all of these advances in technology to be able to meet that demand.
Thank you, Vitalik. Juan, please.
So I think in the Filecoin community, it's been the launch of Filecoin. Filecoin is just 1 year old. It turned one last week and a half ago. So happy birthday, Filecoin! And the network grew to 12 exabytes of capacity, which is a massive, staggering number. So this is vastly more data capacity than all of Web3, and now starts to actually compete with proper centralized cloud storage systems, so we can finally put up a fight against those. And that's about the size of what Google Cloud used to be in 2018. And so like the data usage is also growing exponentially, so that's been pretty exciting. I have to agree, the second thing I'll mention is, I have to agree with Vitalik, zero-knowledge proofs and the entire renaissance of different cryptographic protocols that has been happening for the last few years is just phenomenal. The kinds of things, the kinds of programs and protocols you can write now, and you can make entirely verifiable and private, just gives us a lot of tools and a lot of opportunities to make systems that can put control in the hands of users. Probably the most interesting part of that is to get generic, scalable, verifiable computation and zero knowledge. And so this is where really useful general purpose programming languages and getting much more efficient constructions, that's been phenomenal to see that set of changes. And last, I would probably say the rise of NFTs has been just tremendously important. This can't overstate it. Probably everybody there has seen and is probably sick and tired of talking about NFTs. But I actually think this is socially, culturally, and economically extremely important because it's the beginning of large-scale internet-native property ownership that is not just kind of fungible money. And it begins with art and so on, but it will extend to everything else. It'll extend to digital spaces, it'll extend to actual physical spaces, physical property, physical land, housing, and so on. So this is just the beginning of a massive tide that'll take, of course, 5 to 10 years to develop. But I think this is a huge movement.
Thank you, Juan. Dominic, please.
Well, firstly, I agree with the points that Vitalik and Juan touched on. There's a lot of interesting things happening in blockchain generally. For me, of course, the most exciting thing is that the internet computer blockchain finally underwent Genesis in May earlier this year. And I think this is important for blockchain in very profound ways. The internet computer realizes a vision, an idea, a concept of a world computer that was first mooted 6-7 years ago, where a blockchain can act as the entire stack and will allow you to build absolutely anything using smart contract software and do so without any reliance on the corporate cloud services like Amazon Web Services. So today you can use the internet computer to build, for example, a social media service and blend it with DeFi to create a social fi system. And what's extraordinary about the internet computer is that it runs at web speed, it's incredibly efficient, and it can scale its capacity linearly with the number of nodes in the network, which means that in principle, you could build something like Facebook on the internet computer, but you'd build it with smart contracts and it would look very different to the Facebook of today. It would be social fi, it would be tokenized, the users would be owners of the service and part of the team that runs it too. So, the internet computer has driven this change where, the blockchain is only one part of the stack. When you look at dApps today, really they mostly run on the cloud. The website you're interacting with is coming off a centralized cloud service or a private server machine. When you interact with services running on the internet computer, you're interacting with interactive web content that's served by smart contracts. So for example, people are running chat services on the internet computer. And, a few years ago, that would have been completely unimaginable. And this means that blockchain is going to be the entire future stack. And I think that's a very profound change. Part of this as well is just the power that you can derived from cryptography. The Dfinity Foundation employs the world's largest team, I think, of leading cryptographers, and the Internet computer itself is powered by a lot of novel cryptography, and I think that as well, I think changes the game a bit. In the past, blockchains have just taken cryptography from the shelf. Now blockchain is beginning to develop novel cryptography itself, which is built for specific purposes.
Thank you all for your observation on both the tech front and on applications. Next, I'm going to ask some questions around technology. I would like to start with Vitalik. We heard your keynote this morning, and from what we hear in the community, there has been a lot of discussions and expectation actually around Ethereum 2.0, discussions around scalability and state size, etc. And you talk about layer 2 solutions like rollups this morning. And earlier this year, you talk about 2 state size solutions. So my question is, could you talk a little bit about where we are now in the transition from Ethereum 1.0 to Ethereum 2.0?
Sure. So I think we don't really use the term Ethereum 2.0 as much anymore because I think when we came up with the term, there was an expectation that it would be a much more like drastic change from like one version of the blockchain to another. And I think the way that the roadmap works now is much more incremental, right? There are a few different changes, and each change only changes one or a few things. But from the point of view of an application, like not much changes, right? So because from the point of view of an application, like applications do not have to do anything to migrate from proof of work Ethereum to proof of stake Ethereum. Ethereum just becomes proof of stake, including all of the applications that are on it. So instead, like we think of it as a series of separate upgrades. So I think the big ones are, one is the switch to proof of stake. And there are 2 phases in the switch to proof of stake. There was the launch of the proof of stake beacon chain, which happened at the end of last year. So now the proof of stake beacon chain has been running stably for almost 11 months. There's going to be the first hard fork of the beacon chain, Altair, later this week. And the second phase is the merge, right? And the merge is when the existing Ethereum system and all the applications on it get moved over away from the proof of work chain onto the proof of stake chain. This is an automatic process. It's just like a different type of hard fork. It happens automatically. But that's the end goal. Right now, we actually have had a lot of progress on the merge over the last month. We had a workshop where all of the core developers and researchers came together, and we managed to create public test networks for the merge, and we'll continue to have more test networks for it over the next couple of months. So a lot of progress there. And then the other big piece of what was called 2.0 is sharding. And I think the scaling roadmap now is basically that first we have these independent sort of community created rollup projects, and rollups can give the first boost of scalability. So a factor of 10 for simple rollups, maybe 100 for the rollups with more advanced data compression. And then later, we had data sharding for the Ethereum blockchain, which might come 1 to 2 years from now, and that will increase scalability first. So that's still in earlier stages, but there's a team working on it.
Thank you, Vitalik. Next, I'm going to ask Dominic. We know Dfinity is building an internet computer, and there has been multiple iterations after the mainnet launch. So could you elaborate a bit on how this supercomputer is different from the Web 2 computer as we know, and what could be challenging from a tech perspective?
Well, yeah, okay. So first of all, the internet computer is a blockchain, and you build systems and services on a blockchain using smart contracts. And smart contracts are a profoundly new kind of software that has amazing advantages. So of course, we all know that smart contracts run on a public network rather than on centralized cloud infrastructures like Amazon Web Services, and that's one big advantage. They're tamper-proof, you don't need to protect them with firewalls. They're unstoppable like the internet. They're both software and systems at the same time. They lie somewhere between, and you can compose them, which means you can build systems and services by composing sort of system units in the same way that you build software. Smart contracts can run autonomously, so you can use tokenization to create microeconomies and decentralized value. So we believe that because of the innate advantages of smart contracts, that a blockchain singularity will occur where nearly all of humanity's information systems and services will be rebuilt using smart contracts and run entirely from the blockchain. So for us, when we designed the internet computer, it was important to rethink existing blockchain architectures so that blockchain could act as the entire stack. So one of the interesting differences between the internet computer and traditional blockchains is that smart contracts on the internet computer can actually serve interactive web content directly to end users. So with some clever cryptography, end users can essentially interact directly with the smart contracts, which removes the need to use corporate cloud services like Amazon Web Services in the creation of dApps. And you can get total decentralization and true censorship resistance, which provides ways, for example, to apply more advanced tokenization strategies than you can currently employ in these more centralized architectures that you see today. So, we think that, blockchain is the new internet, and the internet computer is designed to enable true Web 3.0, in which systems and services are built on blockchain using smart contracts. They have access to unlimited computational capacity, and they can serve interactive web content directly to end users, so there are no intermediaries. And in a few months, various decentralized economic rails will activate on the internet computer, and we'll see some very interesting things happening, I think.
Thank you, Dominic. So as we understand, the internet computer is built for Web3 users. Now I would like to move to Juan. We know Protocol Labs and IPFS ecosystem is the leader in distributed storage. You have attracted a large community of developers and users, but there are still some kind of entry barriers, like say equipment requirements, storage cost. So how do you think we can reduce the barriers and onboard more developers and users?
There's actually no cost barrier at all now with Filecoin Plus, which went live earlier this year. You can get storage orders of magnitude cheaper than the current cloud. So this is the world's cheapest storage service, and you can even get it completely free in some cases. So some users, depending on sort of where they are and which service providers they choose, you can get completely free storage for petabytes of scale. So I think at this point, the only barrier is people knowing about it. There's still a lot of hurdles in terms of onboarding tools, and you have to learn how to use the tech and so on. And so that's getting easier, but the barrier is really hearing about it and knowing that you can do it. Right now, there's about 200 or so petabytes of storage on the process of onboarding onto the network. And so really it's more people finding out about it, knowing that they should come, and then trying it out and starting to use it. So, in like the last 6 months, NFT storage, which is kind of like a developer onboarding tool for NFTs, is now storing most of the NFTs in the blockchain space. Is about over 6 million NFTs and about 40 terabytes of NFTs, and like that's just bounded by users wanting to use them.
Talking about NFTs, I think we are moving to the next stage of questions about applications. As we all see, over the past year or so, DeFi and NFT have experienced tremendous growth across multiple chains. So what are your guys' take on the booming of DeFi and NFT? Are these applications heading in the right direction? And what advice would you give to teams in DeFi and NFT? Shall we start with Juan and then Dominic?
Yeah, I think NFTs are amazing. So I think they're a really good example of using blockchain tech for many different kinds of communities. The just explosion of 2D digital art that wouldn't otherwise have been created, that has now been supported through the NFT explosion. It's just amazing to see. There's lots of now 3D art, and that is turning into spaces, like whole large rooms are being created. There's like these really cool kind of museums and galleries where you can mint an entire 3D room and space as an NFT. And so I think that this is Mona. And you can then, once you mint that, you can start assembling that into a larger space and a larger world. And then you can get to like a full digital world. And so this is the beginning of the metaverse. So I actually think that the only hope that the whole world has to stop the large centralized providers from completely owning the metaverse is actually NFTs. Because when people buy an NFT and hold it, they want to be able to use that component, and they want to be able to interact with that piece of property in the digital space in their own way in an open platform. And so by assembling lots of different nuanced kinds of objects and composing them into 3D spaces, composing them into rooms, composing those rooms into larger worlds, and composing those large worlds into the full metaverse, that's how we're going to get an open and free and permissive metaverse like the web. And we're going to prevent like the kind of centralized parties from taking over. So I really think like NFTs are a phenomenal explosion. And I think this is just kind of the digital art part. Later on, NFTs are going to start mapping to all kinds of other sorts of property. Of course, this is beginning in small amounts now, but we haven't seen a large explosion of this yet. Wait until all of your house becomes an NFT, and you can buy or rent your house, or get a version of fractionalizing on your house and so on directly through NFTs. So all kinds of property around the world will be tracked this way. And it's just, I think at this point, about scalability, developer onboarding, tooling, and so on. So even I already know about full-length movies being produced through NFT structures, and creating networks of royalties to be able to flow value and flow rewards to all of the artists and participants that created that movie. So all of the actors, all of the crew, all of the production people, all of the companies, and so on. All of these being developed through kind of a network of royalty attribution through NFT. So I think like this is it enables a lot of ideas that people have had for many decades to finally be realized in the blockchain space. So I think it's the beginning of something great.
Thank you, Juan. Dominic, what do you think?
Well, I think DeFi and NFTs and the tokenization of assets generally are amazing. I'd agree with Juan's point that NFTs are a key way that we can ensure that big tech doesn't end up owning the metaverse. Two new areas that I'd like to draw attention to, which are related, are SocialFi and GameFi. So SocialFi blends social media functionality with DeFi, and GameFi blends game functionality with DeFi. And I think that's where we're going to see blockchain's first billion users coming from. So to give you an idea how this works, there's a chat service running from the Internet Computer blockchain, entirely from the Internet Computer blockchain. And at some point soon, it's going to introduce various advanced tokenization functionality. So in the future, your account on a chat service will also be a token wallet. So we're going to see this merger. People are going to send cryptocurrency, NFTs, tokenized assets with chat messages. You're going to be able to negotiate for things and do atomic swaps. You're going to be able to sign and notarize documents inside the chat flow. So first of all, the functionality of social media will blend with the functionality of DeFi and produce something much, much more exciting. In addition to that, you're going to see that these services are run by DAOs. On the Internet Computer, we have a sort of system called the service nervous system, which is like a sort of turnkey super DAO that dApps and services can assign control to. And with these, people are going to implement interesting new strategies. For example, I think we'll see that users become the owners of these services because they're airdropped governance tokens. And users also become part of the team that manages these services, advocating for them, and also helping with tasks like moderation. And these areas, SocialFi, GameFi with play to earn, where you can actually put down tokens, participate in an online racing game, and actually win the pot. Things like that are going to drive just extraordinary growth in the numbers of users, and really bring blockchain into the mainstream in the same way that NFTs are now, but much more so.
Thank you, Dominic. Vitalik, what do you think? DeFi and NFT in the right direction? Any advice to give to teams in DeFi and NFT?
Yeah, I think the basic ideas in DeFi and NFTs have provided a lot of value. So, for example, stablecoins and including algorithmic stablecoins have been extremely useful for people who want the benefits of cryptocurrency without having to deal with the problems of a price volatility. Decentralized exchanges have been amazing. I think like 5 years ago, we were all complaining about centralized exchanges having a lot of power and often getting hacked and just being big single points of failure for the ecosystem. And now centralized exchanges still exist, but things like Uniswap have been have emerged as very powerful alternatives. And well, now there's not just Uniswap, there's also CowSwap, and then there's plenty of other swaps. So that ecosystem is doing well, though at the same time, I do think that there is such a thing as like people trying too hard to make DeFi overcomplicated and creating like complex yield farming things that probably add more smart contract risk than they provide in actual benefits. So I guess I think the most useful DeFi is the simplest DeFi. With NFTs, I strongly agree on that NFTs have been really valuable. They've allowed artists, writers, and plenty of people to have these completely new business models, which is amazing. The one point of caution I would introduce there is that I think we should not assume that NFTs in their current form are financially sustainable until they've survived at least one crypto winter, maybe more crypto winters, because the crypto space has a history of things that look good and have very impressive numbers and a lot of money flowing around for 6 months to a year, but then where everything starts losing value 1 to 2 years in the future, right? So it's, I think, important to just be patient and just wait a bit so that we can actually see and understand what the long-term sustainable NFT market would actually look like.
Thanks, Vitalik. So those projects create real value and sustainable, can survive for a long time. And the next question is, I'm borrowing from Dominic's keynote this morning titled Blockchain Singularity. In terms of applications, what do you think is or could be the singularity point that can trigger mass adoption and that can bring in tens or even hundreds of millions of users to the blockchain world? Can I start with Dominic this time?
Well, sometimes the technology races ahead of adoption, and I think that's happened here. Banks are still using COBOL and employing 80-year-old programmers to fix it. So, we're not going to get, blockchain singularity is something that happens over decades. Look, I'd say this. I think DeFi is going to be bigger than traditional finance within 10 years. I think in 10 years' time, it'll be completely obvious that the majority of building is going to start taking place on a blockchain. And the reason is simple. Smart contracts are a new kind of software, and they have very profound advantages over systems built on the traditional IT stack. So for that reason, inevitably, blockchain will become the complete stack, and people will build with smart contracts. Smart contracts will eat the world, to borrow a phrase from Andreessen Horowitz. And it's not going to happen overnight. So when I talk about blockchain singularity, I don't mean we're all going to wake up and all of a sudden everything's built on blockchain. I think it's going to accelerate. And I do think that it's inevitable that, blockchain is not only the new internet, but it's also the new stack. And what's really key here is that when you rebuild things with smart contracts, you gain new capabilities. And that means when you rebuild things, you reimagine them. Okay, so if you look at DeFi, it doesn't look like traditional finance. Ethereum is a highly constrained blockchain, but people chose to build DeFi on Ethereum, not on Amazon Web Services, because you can't build DeFi on Amazon Web Services. You need smart contracts. And that means that when we recreate social media, when we recreate games, and when we recreate enterprise systems, in every single case, we're going to reimagine what they look like. And their very essence is going to be different. So, I think I mentioned earlier that I believe that the first billion users for blockchain are going to come from SocialFi and GameFi. So this is social media and games blended with DeFi, which will make them fundamentally different in the case, for example, of social media services today and game services today, to what they're going to be. So it's exciting. It's going to happen incrementally, and I think it's going to start accelerating in the coming years. 10 years from now, the world is going to be a completely different place. Nobody will have any doubt that blockchain is not only the new internet, but the new stack.
Thank you, Dominic. Juan, what do you think would be the trigger of mass adoption?
Yeah, I think blockchain systems enable many new kinds of technologies and enable new kinds of applications to be built. But at the end of the day, humans haven't changed that much in the last 10, 20 years. So the same sort of applications are going after the same kind of use cases will likely be the billion user type of adoption things. So I agree with Dominic. It's about social experiences, likely games, because games are extremely social. So part of what makes games such a successful thing is that they have high engagement and they enable people to interact for long periods of time in a way that maybe a social network app doesn't. So games are highly engaging and they're very social. So they have like that going for them. So I think it's things like that. So you can think of, just look at the rise of TikTok and just like the sort of explosion in usage around the world, like very fast. Like we will likely see a blockchain powered social network be the first thing that hits billions of users around the world. then after that, it probably gains. What I think is going to be the most successful thing, though, to really kind of cement and keep the users in the long term is going to be some kind of metaverse structure where people's entire notion of their digital self and their digital identity and their digital property and relationships and so on start being mediated by the metaverse. And so you shouldn't think of the metaverse as a thing that you like, as an application that you open. You're in your computer and like you open your email and your social network and your game, and then you open the metaverse. Like, that's not quite the right thing. Think of the metaverse as the entire computing environment in which you open applications, just much more oriented towards interactions and in kind of an immersive environment, and a world where you can own and control the interactions and potentially make them programmable. So this might couple with 3D or may not. It could be that it's 2D. And it might also couple with augmented reality and VR and so on, but all of those things will be enhancements. The metaverse is about how you control the spaces and how you interact with other people. So yeah, again, social to games to metaverse.
Thank you. Vitalik, what do you see as the trigger of mass adoption?
I mean, I think the things that Juan and Dominic mentioned, with like some kind of social media application that incorporates blockchain aspects and finance aspects, there's a lot of opportunity for it. There's a lot of opportunity in games as well. And also, I think things that people are doing today, right? Like even just things like what people are already using blockchains for with around financial and NFT, like ENS and all of these applications. I think all of those have a lot of room to grow from here as well.
Thank you, Vitalik. I have a follow-up question on application. You talk about a little bit on decentralization this morning. I would like to hear what is your thinking on how we should treat decentralization and centralization. Should there be a balance in building applications? People have been talking about the pros and the cons, costs and benefits of both ideas, the decentralization and centralization.
Yeah, I think the balance depends on what layer of the stack you're building. So if you're building a base layer, then decentralization is hugely important. If you're building an application that is close to the user and it's an application that only users are interacting with directly, then decentralization is less important. Though I do think that there's a lot of there are, like, if you can decentralize without high costs, then you should. If there are a lot of cases where even if complete decentralization doesn't make sense, what might make sense is using some of the cryptographic technologies that we talked about. So encryption, zero knowledge proofs, all of these things, to allow the application to provide stronger guarantees of things like safety and privacy to its users. So that, and I think there's a lot of examples of this even in the blockchain space already. Like there's applications that do depend on a server, but where the server uses zero knowledge proofs to convince its users that it's following the rules of some system. And then there is also this middle layer of applications where the users of those applications are not users, but are other applications. And in that case, I think also like the reason why full decentralization is valuable and not just kind of this lower level of trustlessness that I think makes sense for things that are close to end users is that in those cases, like you don't just want safety, you also want liveness, right? So safety basically means the application does not betray you, like it doesn't leak your data, it doesn't like steal your money. Liveness means the application keeps working, right? And like anything based on a single computer, it can give you safety if you use cryptography, but it cannot give you guarantees of guarantees of liveness, right? Whoever runs it could shut it down. But if you build a fully decentralized system, then once you put it out there, it's out there, and that gives a lot more, or that lets the application developers that then connect into that application the ability to have a lot more confidence that they're building on something that will continue to exist, right? Like, there's a lot of blockchain applications that like they plug into other applications in a way where they just have to they have to assume that that application will continue to exist for the long term. Like, for example, there's a lot of DAOs that directly plug into Uniswap, and so they have to assume that Uniswap will continue to exist. There's a lot of projects that directly plug into ENS. They have to assume ENS will continue to exist. So in those situations, full decentralization is more important. In situations where it's just an application talking to an end user, it's more likely that like some centralization is okay, especially if it provides efficiency. And though you may want to look into some of these cryptographic techniques that allow centralized systems to still provide some degree of trustlessness.
Thank you very much, Vitalik. Next, I'm going to ask some questions regarding ecosystem building. All chains, ecosystems are trying to involve as many as stakeholders, if I could say, like projects, developers, users, and investors as well. There has been various initiatives like ecosystem fund, foundation grants, hackathons to grow its ecosystem. So from what you see and your experience, what are the effective ways to build and to maintain a dynamic ecosystem? Can I start with Juan this time?
Yeah, great that you asked this. So we've been focusing a lot on building a very high quality, what we call a builder funnel. So we think that the right way to help a community grow is by thinking about every stage of the process in building an application or running a service or using a technology or and so on, and just make it way easier to succeed in that stage. So if you think about most user products and so on, they succeed when they have good user experience. So approach your building applications around your ecosystem like a user experience problem. How are developers experiencing coming to the community and to the ecosystem and trying to build there? So we think about it. I come from this background of looking at a lot of different startup ecosystems and understanding the dynamics of ecosystem development around companies and small groups that over time find product market fit and grow and so on. And so we designed like this builder funnel over time that starts with lots of developer resources and lots of documentation and lots of pointers and so on how to get started. Then from there, you can go into hackathons that can help you kick the tires on the systems and learn about it, learn about how to develop things with them. You can get hands-on help from other people. You can find others and get to know them. You can form relationships. Oftentimes what helps build projects is the relationships with other people. And so we try to make those hackathons really, really fun. We learned a ton from ETH Global. ETH Global is a phenomenal organization from the Ethereum community. And we work a lot with them to build like this super engaging set of hackathons that help developers learn how to use the technology and realize their dreams. And then from those, some of those hacks in those hackathons might be good opportunities for applications that might live further on. It might be something that they deploy and that's it. Maybe it's just a contract that lives somewhere, or maybe it's a larger scale service that they might grow. And so at that point, we have grant programs structured to help them have a little bit of money to be able to kind of work on their project full time and see if there's something there. Then from there, the next stage is really accelerators. It's getting to, in some places, there are different groups that can help you think about how to create a business if that's your goal, or how to create a community if that's your goal, and help you kind of speed up the process and give you a lot of knowledge and hands-on help to figure out how to get there. And then after that, you get into kind of ecosystem funds, and that could be grants, like large grants for public funding. So this might mean, if people are building something that is open source tech that everyone should use, should just be public funding, or investments into companies and services that other people want to use. So you can think of this entire builder funnel starting with developer resources, going into hackathons. People might go through multiple hackathons, learning until finally they build a project that is a good application that might take off. Then from there into next step grants, into accelerators, from there into the ecosystem funds. And we're starting to kind of expand the reach of this builder funnel to many of the other networks and systems that are building around the Filecoin ecosystem. So groups like Ceramic and Textile, tons of other groups that are kind of like helping make the ecosystem work. So we think that that's the best way to kind of grow this. And nowadays, we're hitting like tens of thousands of developers, and hundreds of projects, and hundreds of new startups being created. So we're seeing like a lot of like really good activity.
Thank you, Juan. So different strategies or initiatives at different stages. Next, can I move to Vitalik? What do you at the Ethereum Foundation or the bigger ecosystem do to promote and attract more stakeholders into the ecosystem?
Sure. And I think a lot of the things that we do are very similar to things that Juan mentioned. So the foundation has been like very, I think, designed around bringing in and working with the community almost since the beginning. There's the grant programs are huge. Like I think more money is being allocated through grants than is being allocated through kind of like the foundation hiring people in a traditional way. There are hackathons, though the hackathons actually are themselves mostly not organized by the EF itself, but are organized by EF grant recipients. There's a lot of and then we even sometimes give grants to organizations that give grants themselves. Sometimes like we even give grants to local community organizations that give grants within their community locally. So I think at the foundation can do a lot, but at the end of the day, the foundation can only do so much. And ultimately there is I think it should be the community that's kind of doing bringing in most of the effort and bringing in most of the ideas. So that is something that has taken years for us to build up, and that we even have actively built up in a lot of ways, right? Even the Ethereum proof of stake clients are just independent companies that have that exist in a lot of corners of the world. Scaling is and these roll-up teams are just a lot of different projects run by a lot of different people. So there are a lot of I think the foundation's role in the ecosystem is more about doing what it can to try to encourage, subsidize someone and coordinate all of these different activities. But like it's not the center, right? It's the edges of the ecosystem where most of the creativity comes from.
Thank you, Vitalik. Dominic, do you have anything to add?
Well, I think, Juan described the general process very well, and we do much of the same. The foundation's given out, I think, about 100 grants to different projects now. We've run a few hackathons. We have, around 1,000 plus developers now building, which is, I think, pretty good, given that we're only 5 months old. I think where our approach differs a little bit from mainstream blockchain is, we're seeing a lot of new blockchains, especially proof of stake blockchains, giving out very, very large developer grants. And we see grants a little bit differently. We want developers to build fully decentralized dApps where they hand over control to a sort of super DAO called a service nervous system that enables them to run really as extensions of the blockchain itself, so that the DApp really just creates a sort of microeconomy within the macroeconomy of the blockchain. And where, the dApps fully decentralize, run decentralization auctions, and raise funds into the DAO itself. And thereafter, the community becomes the custodian of the funds and, pays it out in developer grants. So we're doing much the same kind of stuff, but we have more of a focus on decentralization. We think the current model where you see foundations giving out these colossal grants will probably backfire eventually. And we saw this with EOS. They allocated almost $1.5 billion for investment into projects building on EOS. And it didn't work out. And we prefer a much more decentralized and organic approach where the funding comes from the decentralized ecosystem itself and the community, and people build dApps that really run as extensions of the blockchain, which will give them much more freedom in the future to employ advanced tokenization strategies. So that's, I agree with everything in the general approach described, but that's where we sort of diverge a bit, I think.
Thank you. So for teams in our audience, what kind of support you can get from the foundations and where and how you can get them. Next, I'm asking a question from the investor's perspective. There were different and in a few cases controversial voices about the role of VCs, both traditional VC and crypto VCs, a role in supporting the ecosystem. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. Besides funding, what role do you think VCs can play in the blockchain space? Or with the rise of DAO, like Dominic mentioned, and other funding sources, do we still even need VCs in the crypto space? Can I start with Vitalik?
Sure. I think one example of a VC that does a good job of not just being a VC would be Paradigm, right? Like they have, they give money to a lot of projects, and I think that they're better than a lot of other VCs in terms of choosing projects, not just for their ability to just make some short-term money off of a bubble, but that are actually long-term technologically interesting and meaningful for the ecosystem. But also they have an active research team, right? And their research team, I think, actually does do a lot of good research. They even contribute to the research of other projects in the Ethereum ecosystem. So I think that would be one example of a VC firm that's actually doing a lot of a very meaningful and useful things. I think, but I do think that in the future, we are going to go back to finding ways to launch more projects without VC involvement. I think DAOs could be are already starting to be an interesting alternative for doing that. So VCs will definitely, I think, will have to step up and improve. And if they think that they can just throw some money around it and expects to get great results from that, that will be harder in the future than it was in the past.
Thanks, Dominic.
I think the way that blockchains have been funded in the past reflects how dApps will be funded in the future. So, for example, if you look at the Dfinity Foundation and the Internet Computer Project, back in February 2017, we ran what was equivalent then to an ICO before the name was really coined, and it was a decentralized crowdfunder run on Ethereum, and there was a ledger of what are now called ICP governance tokens. And there was a company called String Labs that had helped incubate the project up to that point, and it got a share of the allocation of founder tokens on that ledger. So I think, dApps, other decentralized services will be funded the same way in the future. And that's already happening, I think, where, VCs get involved at an early stage, fund the founding team, help them get to the point where they can, assign control to DAO and fully decentralize and run a decentralization auction and bring funds into the DAO. And so I think the model will change. I do worry that at the moment, in the rush for fast money, we're sort of heading down a slightly centralized path that actually will hobble many of the projects that have received these big grants and VC funds, because they'll find that it becomes quite difficult to decentralize those services in the ways that they want to. So I think the future is that VCs get involved with projects at an early stage and fund them in much the same way that they funded new blockchains in the past, and in return receive some share of the founder tokens that are dispersed in a decentralization auction. That for me is the future.
Thanks. Juan, your comment?
Yeah, so it might have a maybe the controversial view here. So I personally think that VCs and just investors in general are an extremely important part of any technology ecosystem, because they fulfill a really important function, which is to find and spot the next wave of a technological revolution, and they help support the development of that new technology. So I recommend the people read the book of economist Carlota Perez about technological revolutions and financial capital, and trace how it really is kind of like a good investment landscape can help technological revolutions actually get off the ground and develop over time. Now, of course, like in all markets, you have many groups that are really good, and you then have sort of like the median average, and then you have bad groups. I think the best investors are groups that help find and support valuable projects. They take a risk in helping realize that project. They tend to contribute more in knowledge and hands-on help than they do with money. They are really part of the team, and usually they are people who have built something before, who have been part of the past technological revolution, so they know how to get things off the ground and can help the next generation of builders to build something. And that's what originally VCs meant. It was the people who had kind of built things in the past that can help create the next generation of technology. So I think that those kinds of investors are going to be really critical. And moreover, not just in terms of investment, but also in public funding. So I think most of the public funding structures, the reason they don't work that well is because there's no good way of having investor types. So the best public funding structures that have ever existed were some of the public funding structures that ARPA used to develop the internet itself. And that had a structure kind of similar to investment, where you had the DARPA program managers thinking through what would potentially be a potential future, spelling out a vision, working to find builders, understanding their projects, seeing how those projects fit into the larger picture, and supporting them and helping them to realize that vision. So I think public funding is going to create opportunities for things like investors to emerge, to help public goods be developed. Now, what does an investor mean? With blockchains, it's just changing the picture. The mechanics are now different. You now no longer need to have a traditional firm somewhere necessarily in the same kind of structure. You can have a DAO or something like that. I would still consider that an investor potentially, or a VC structure. And so that whole class of parties, as long as they're contributing knowledge, as long as they're helping a lot, as long as they're making it more likely that great technological revolutions happen, they're here to stay, and they're a really important part of the puzzle. And I would say, like, we as part of this builders funnel, one of the critical components there is creating a space for investors to spot which are the interesting projects that are developing. So definitely invite you to come and work with us in the Filecoin ecosystem. Reach out to us. We have a very large investor network that is helping support and grow all the different projects. And the same goes for builders. Like if you are just getting started with Web3, definitely reach out to us. We'll help you get going, help point you into right directions, and sort of join the network and help us build the future. So I think they're very needed and they're here to stay.
Thanks, Wen. So my takeaway is that VCs still play a significant role in supporting the ecosystem, but VCs need to adapt to the changes in a blockchain ecosystem. So in the interest of time, I'm going to round up this panel. Before I let everybody go, I have a final question for the three of you. Looking ahead, I'm curious to know about what would be your focus for the year to come. Can I start with Dominic?
We've got two big features coming in 3 to 4 months. One is the availability of turnkey service nervous systems for dApp builders. Service nervous systems are kind of super DAOs. They use the same technology as the network nervous system that manages and governs the internet computer blockchain itself. And we've got well over 100 projects waiting for that functionality so they can fully decentralize, run decentralization auctions and so on. So I think we're going to see a sort of Cambrian explosion of fully decentralized dApps running under the control of DAOs in a few months. And the other really interesting thing that's coming is integration first with Bitcoin and then with Ethereum. So the internet computer is powered by something called chain key cryptography. And chain key cryptography allows the blockchain itself to have what's equivalent to a public key and be able to create signatures against that public key. So the internet computer blockchain will shortly be able to create Bitcoin transactions and Ethereum transactions. The first direct integration is with Bitcoin. And this is going to give smart contracts, we call them canister smart contracts, on the internet computer blockchain, their own Bitcoin addresses. And smart contracts on the internet computer are going to be able to send, receive, and hold Bitcoin. And when a smart contract on the internet computer sends Bitcoin to another smart contract, it will move in a similar way that when a smart contract on Ethereum sends Ether to another smart contract on Ethereum. It'll actually move on the Bitcoin blockchain. So what's exciting about that is it will provide sort of smart contract functionality for Bitcoin, which will allow all kinds of Bitcoin DeFi to flourish. It'll also mean that something like $1.5 trillion of Bitcoin liquidity will become available on the internet computer. Once we've done that, we're then going to extend the chain key systems further and integrate with Ethereum so that it's possible to do two-way calling. So smart contracts on the internet computer will be able to call into smart contracts on Ethereum and vice versa. That's obviously has a lot of potential. It's also just very exciting from a sort of technological perspective because there's been an absolutely huge amount of work behind the scenes that's allowed us to get to this point where we can actually, we not only have chain key running, it currently powers the internet computer, but that we can now start extending it so that the internet computer can interact with other blockchains by creating transactions on behalf of its smart contracts. So that's a bit of, that's another very interesting development for blockchain. Integration of blockchains without bridges and side chains and things like that is coming in only 3 or 4 months.
Thank you, Dominic. Juan, what would be your top 1 or top 2 agenda for the year to come?
Yeah, so I'll mention a couple. So one is just scaling the usage of the network. So this means making it easier to use Filecoin data storage, onboarding large scale data sets. So this is many petabyte scale data sets. And making it simpler to build kind of consumer grade products to use the storage. And the second is bringing computation to the Filecoin network. So first, it's you add all this data to the network, and then you want to be able to run computation over it. So one part of that is adding smart contracts to Filecoin. So we announced a thing called the FVM, very inspired by the EVM to the Filecoin network. It has a WASM core and it has EVM. It has an EVM on top, so you can run full interop with EVM directly. But if you want to kind of like slot in other VMs like the Agoric VM and so on, you can do that. And then that layer we're going to use to do verifiable computation over the data. So that's like the really key part, is be able to run arbitrary programs, as Dominic is saying, in linear scaling over the data stored on Filecoin. So like that's where a lot of the development time and so on from a lot of groups is going to go into. So that's super exciting stuff that's coming around the corner. It's going to enable all kinds of applications.
Thank you, Fan. Vitalik, what would be your focus for the year to come?
I think finishing the switch to proof of stake and sharding is definitely the biggest thing. As I've mentioned, the proof of stake chain already exists, but this last step that we call the merge of moving the existing Ethereum system onto the proof of stake chain is something that has not happened yet, but is increasingly looking like it can happen quite soon. So once that happens, then like the energy consumption of the Ethereum network will go down by a factor of more than 1,000, possibly up to 10,000. There will have higher safety, higher efficiency in some ways. And at the same time, all of the work that is being done on improving scalability so that people can once again use the blockchain with low transaction fees is something that has seen a lot of progress, but there's still a lot of work left in order to kind of carry all of that work to the point where it's a complete thing that people can easily just use and get all of their benefits from without sacrificing the benefits that blockchains currently provide.
Thank you all. I think that brings us to the end of this panel. Thanks again to Vitalik, Juan, and Dominic for sharing your observation and your insights of the blockchain space. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing you again next year.
Thank you.